You see, the neo-colonizer in his diabolical machinations was very clever. All of them. The British had created long ago something called the Commonwealth.
Which is common poverty.
Which is headquartered in London. They even tell you that your ambassadors are no longer ambassadors, they are high commissioners. The French have also created their La Francophonie, headquartered in Paris. And they tell you, of course, you are Francophone, the others are Anglophone. The weak Portuguese, without as much gusto after the Carnation Revolution in 1974, I'm not saying as much, but there is something called the Organization of Portuguese-speaking countries. And you belong to it. And of course, the Belgians, in their own way, have also created something that makes the Congolese true north to be Brussels. So we all look to Lisbon, Portugal, we look to Paris, we look to London, and we are happy to be called Lusophone, Anglophone, Francophone, and in that way, our elite are then geared towards seeking approval and even defining your policy on the basis of the neo-colonizer. And that, I think, is something that has continued to date, so that when the Americans come into the fray, and remember, the Americans were not your classical colonizers, particularly as regards the continent of Africa. But when they meet, and this is what brings me to an iconic meeting which we never talk about as much as we should, which takes place in Crimea, in Yalta. That meeting that is attended by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is attended by Joseph Stalin, and attended by Winston Churchill. These are the victors over Germany. And the Soviet Union at that time is a powerhouse, and of course the British is not a powerhouse, but
the Commonwealth impact was
the Commonwealth is already there. The Americans and the new kid in the block, and after that you go to San Francisco and create the United Nations, and you say that the architecture of this particular outfit is that you have all these members. The Africans are not there; they are still under the colonial yoke. And when you do that, you say we'll have the 5 permanent members, is it 5 of them, and we have veto power. The Americans now become a hegemon, and they begin to define policy in many ways. And that does change the equation, because the rest of Europe, particularly Western Europe, operates at the behest of the United States of America. Of course, the Soviet Union also has its own client states in Eastern Europe, and African freedom fighters are also gravitating toward the Soviet Union for obvious ideological reasons in those early days. Africa then goes through this phase of what I call a split personality. A split personality in the sense that you want to do dalliance with the Americans and the West, but if they don't play ball, you have the Soviet Union on this hand, and that schizophrenia continues until the collapse of the Berlin Wall. During which Europe and America now tell us that there is something called democracy. And that thing called democracy demands that you have multi-party politics. It demands that you must have something that we call human rights, which we define. It demands that you must have 2-term limit, which we define. It demands that your economies must change, and the IMF and World Bank are telling you what to do. We have the WTO rule, and if you behave in a manner that we don't
bring you to the table,
then we sanction you. We no longer are going to trade with you. And Africa finds herself in that space, with the consequence that when the structural adjustment systems, the structural adjustment programs fail lamentably, they fail lamentably, we now find our economies are not growing. So we have 2 organizations that are telling us what to do. Not how Europe underdeveloped Africa, but how Europe is continuing to underdevelop Africa.
On that, I would like to reflect this concept of forming up of the United Nations in one of my undergraduate studies, where Rome, when it broke apart in the reign of Caesar, Then it went into the four pieces, the Calasanders, Las Macas, Ptolemy, and etc. And then further on broke apart to the Sueves, the Alemanis, the Germans, the Francophones, the Anglophones, the Herulis, the Burgundians, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, to form what we call Europe now. The difference between their division and African division is that Romanism remained at the center of their division, so to speak. It must sound like a contradiction of terms. But when the European Union finally seeks for a common convergence into the euro dollar or the European money, when they begin to talk about foreign policy, when they begin to protect their own sovereignty, Europe has then subtly oneness in the midst of their Italian, French, of course, the French call the British the dogs, this one called this one frogs. But when an African comes as an enemy, they quickly forget the dogs and the frogs, and they can unite over a problem. Come to Africa. The opposite seems to happen. We don't seem to think that what happened in the 52 states in America, what happened in the states in Europe, what happened in the villages and the tribes of Asia, the villages and tribes of China, could become a possibility. You walk through social media, you actually have propagators. Every time you put something positive about the unity of Africa, I bet you 2/3 of the comments are those that are telling you that it can't happen. It will not happen. Some have legitimate reasons why that can't happen, but I fail to find what makes you think that it cannot happen in Africa when we already have the American flag with all those, when you have the European flags with all those different political, linguistic, country sort of individuality, but they could find a common convergence of function so that they can become one voice. In conclusion, the American policy and the European policy, when it comes to Africa, it is an isolated dealing with each piece. It's not a holistic policy. So when you find the American policy on Guinea-Bissau and the American policy on Zimbabwe or the American policy on South Africa, I bet you think that you are reading 3, 4, 5 different pieces of paper, because the Djibouti one has their interest in terms of looking after this part of the territory. The Zimbabwean one could have a variation. So in them dealing with us as individuals, we have lost the homogeneous focus of dealing with American policy, particularly when it comes to African, because it is not one shoe fits all. And therefore we needed to look at the Berlin Conference and its impact post the propagators of it in the hands of the neo-colonizers who now come into office to implement, manage, and drive the same process which was oppressing them, vis-a-vis the breakages of Europe, helping them to come up with their division and creating a mega economic structure through which they can continuously push the agenda.
But I want us to move to a lot more contemporary, and I want to lay a basis for it.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us once again. If you're a new subscriber, welcome to this beautiful family. Here we talk about Africa, the well-being, the progress, and the unity of Africa. In this video, we have two prominent African leaders, African voices, elders who promote the love for Africa in the hearts of the youth. We have them having this deep and important conversation on Africa and Africa's relationship with the West. We hope you enjoy the video. We are glad you join us every time, and we hope you learned a lot from today's video. Until next time, peace out.